Welcome to Cubs and Culture for 10/26/2018. The Dodgers are 0-2 in the World Series. In 7-game series, if you go down 0-2, you tend to lose 85% of the time. So, yeah, let's hope that still holds true. Okay, anyway, we're up to the 1956 Best Picture winner, um, Around the World in 80 Days from the Jules Verne novel. I really like this movie. It's probably the place where where I disagree the most with like sort of the general consensus, and that it's often cited as one of the weaker best pictures. As you can tell by the tomato meter, 72%. A lot of people have an issue with it being slow and or shallow, which I don't really have an issue with. I think it's an absolutely delightful film. It helps that I really like Jules Verne and actually read almost all his stuff. Anyway, so let me bring up the trailer and stuff. I also want to flag this. It's quite possible. This movie, Around the World in 80 Days, might be... It's debatably the only best picture in history that is science fiction. And I'll get into that a little bit during the trail. So see you in a moment. Dodgers and Red Sox are starting in like 4 minutes, so I'll see you guys in a bit. Okay, that was a very long game. Okay, so getting back to Around the World in 80 Days. If you've never seen it, the story is Phineas Fogg is a mechanical, very Englishman who's made a bet at the Reform Club that he could go around the world in 80 days. It takes place in 1873 because that's when a track in India, a trail track was completed in India. Now, it being a science fiction film, the issue is it depends upon sort of your definition of science fiction. Most people would consider the novel, Jules Verne's novel, a scientific romance, which is the old term for science fiction, because it's all about, there's a sort of a love story with Princess Eldora, who's right there on the right, and it's all about the wonderment of technology in terms of, hey, we can finally do this around the world in 80 days, which is really fast. And the movie still has that a little bit. The issue is whether or not the celebration of new technology, because of being able to do it in 80 days, was new in 1873. Whether or not the celebration of new technology is enough to make it science fiction, or whether or not the technology has to be speculative. Because even when the novel was written, it wasn't speculative technology, insofar as it was actually possible for someone to do this trip. Given that that railroad in India finally opened up, and then also the Great Continental Railroad in the U.S. And so that's for the book. The movie then adds another layer of this, because the book, I think it's far easier to argue that it's sort of a scientific romance and or science fiction, because it being a Verne book, and then also the book is entirely about the timetable, and then Phineas Fogg is something of like a parody of a scientist. The movie is a little bit harder because it's 100 years later, and it has sort of a quintessential nature to it, and so that's sort of one of the things I think is very interesting in the movie. This movie and story is how you classify it. Anyway, so the first clip I'm going to show up, I think, is sort of the place where if you don't think it's science fiction, you have to sort of deal with this shot. Okay, so this shot is in the prologue, and it's Everett R. Morrow setting up the story, and so it has this great shot, because this is the first Best Picture winner, and it was shot in widescreen. It was shot in the Todd A.O. process, which is like 5 or 6 films were made in it. Because of the first widescreen that used one camera. And so there's that great shot of celebration of technology. And the thing is, Morrow is talking about here is how um, the power of technology can lead us to destruction and of hope. And by the way, here's this story by Jules Verne, this great futurist, about how a man goes around the world in 80 days. And so because of that, it feels like the movie is absolutely celebrating technology and everything like that. And it's Phineas Fogg, I think you can read him as sort of a parody of a scientist. And so because of that, I don't know if you should classify it as a science fictional. Anyway, let's talk about the film now. Okay, so this sequence is probably the most famous in the film. I'm not going to show all of it. It's them in the hot air balloon, which is sort of the endearing central image of the film. And I think this is sort of the sequences that annoy people, because it can be slow, and it's very just pretty photography and everything like that. But I really, really like this sort of thing, because it's sort of the joy and wonder of traveling. And the movie has absolutely gorgeous cinematography, and it won cinematography at the Oscars, and everything like that. Now, as a point of reference, even though this is sort of the most enduring image of the film, as a matter of fact, it shouldn't exist. This is a sequence that was added to the film, and everyone thinks of Phineas Fogg traveling around in a hot air balloon around the world in 80 days. That's an invention of the movie. It's not in the book. And the Jules Verne Society was actually pissed at this when that first came out. But in any case, I really like this sort of stuff, especially since the movie has sort of a easygoing tone with everything. I also gotta say this: I really like David Niven as Phineas Fogg. He's very, very British, and he's kind of a ridiculous person because he's so British. And David Niven does that very, very well. Cantinflas, who is the Passepartout, change of nationality aside, he does a very good job playing the character, and he's very, very funny. One of the things I really do like about the screenplay is it does manage to work in like 12 different ways of transportation. Then also it gives Cantinflas basically bits for every one of his abilities. Cantinflas was this great Mexican performer. He's kind of Charlie Chaplin-esque. At this time, he was the most wealthy and independent actor in all of the world. And this is basically his only English language film. And so he was a bullfighter and an acrobat and a whole bunch of other things. And the movie does a good job of working all that crap in. Okay, so this sequence, what you're watching right now, is the train sequence from India. Now, there's a lot of sequences like this in the film, and I really like this travel log stuff. I think it's just pretty, and it really gives you the sensation of traveling. Now, the one thing I did want to point out, and this is a good good example of it, is because this is some of the earliest widescreen stuff, and it's the earliest widescreen winner in history. The movie has this weird photographic effect, and it was related to the Todd AO, where the images sometimes will bow out, making it more circular, and that's sort of an interesting technical flaw in this film, because it keeps reinforcing that the world is round, and I'm sure it's unintentional, and you could really see it in this sequence right here, because of the girders and everything, and it's just a distortion because of the Todd AO process being so early in the technology, that I think it's kind of fun. Okay, so the other thing that this movie does that very, very well and sort of interesting is that it has a because you're meeting a whole bunch of different cultures and you don't have a whole bunch of time to spend with them, is it makes a whole bunch of stereotypes, and it deals with stereotypes. So like the Spaniards are very, very bullfighting, very, very passionate. Phineas Fogg is very, very British, and there's the screenplay is smart enough that it has this one moment where Phineas Fogg just sort of spoke in broken English to this Chinese guy, or Thai guy, and it was supposed to be Like, he speak English, and the guy who answers in perfect Oxford English. So the movie knows it's dealing with stereotypes, and then it undermines it, which is a kind of a clever, funny thing. I'm glad that scene's included. The other thing that's sort of interesting in this, because you're dealing with like a travel log of countries, so you have a lot of sort of the main sort of thing. So like in Spain, they have a bullfight. In France, they have women, etc. In America, because you're in America now, right now, this is the first bit of scenes in America. What the film focuses on in America is this election in California. Which is sort of interesting that what people associate with America in the context of this film is politics. And then also it's going to cut back to Phineas Fogg and company in a second, and they're going to be absolutely outraged, like not only is not the right word, but flabbergasted at like what the fuck is going on. And I really like this sort of self-deprecating thing about Americanism just being empty spectacle, but political size, because this is entirely like an election. And in the context of the movie, it's sort of the American character comes across as having to be political. Again, like the Spaniards being passionate bullfighters, and the French being artsy-fartsy womanizers, etc. Or the Japanese being Buddhist, because you spend some time in Japan with doing all of that. So again, the movie is very delightful as a travel log. I really like sort of a lot of the humor in the film. Where even though it deals with stereotypes and it's sort of a surface level detail of the cultures, the movie is smart enough to undermine that at times, because of the nature of that Chinese guy who speaks perfect English, the Fogg being very, very British, etc. Okay, so anyway, these are the closing credits. I'm not going to show all of them because it's a lot. This is one of the first films. This is the first film in Best Picture history where the credits are sort of entertaining in and of themselves. Because what it is an animated version of the story, and it takes about 4 minutes to go through it. And it obviously the clock is on Phineas Fogg, and the bicycle is on Passport 2, etc. And the other thing about this movie is it has 44 different cameos in it. And in fact, the word cameo was coined by Mike Todd, who's the producer of this film, for it. In any case, the reason why I'm showing it is I really like this animation stuff. I like how because this movie it was a Roadhouse feature, so it has exit music and overture and stuff like that. And so I really like this sort of thing at the end. They have summary of the credits, and then it helps you identify all the cameos, because the spotting of the cameos is also fun. It's not as fun as it probably was in the 50s, because not all the actors have survived. Not all the cameos are the necessarily the stars we focus on today. Okay, so at the end of the day, I understand why this film might be considered shallow. I really like it. I really like the story. I think the screenplay does a damn good job of adapting it, and I love the humor of the film. I think it's not as shallow as people think, because I really do think it's playing around with sort of the wonders of technology and the shrinking of the globe, those sort of themes, which again feels very science fiction-y to me, or scientific romance, but I'm not entirely sure about that. Anyway, so that's going to be it. Have a good day. Cubs and Culture out.